Hey folks, this is a short story about a space orc called Grokka and how he decides to become an Ultramarine. I hope you enjoy it. Grokka da Sneaky was, by orc standards, a genius, which is to say, by any other standards, he was still quite dim. But in orc culture, thinking outside the box meant realising there was a box, and then smashing it to bits for no good reason. What was Grokka's latest stroke of genius? He was going to pretend to be an ultramarine. That's right, a big blue Hume. It all started after Grokka's mob tangled with those shiny blue ultramarines. Grokka noticed two things. They shouted about something called da Emprah, and they had big shiny daka. But the most important part, they wore blue. And every self-respecting orc knew that blue was the luckiest colour. So Grokka set out to make himself into one of those ultramarines. Sure, he didn't have the ceramite armour or a bolter, but that wasn't the problem. Grokka had something much more powerful than those things, orky belief. And if there's one thing every orc knows, it's that orc machinery works because they believe it works. They slap together bits of metal, gears and gunpowder, and as long as the orcs believe in it hard enough, the whole mess functions. It shouldn't, but it does. Engines roar to life, guns fire, sometimes wildly, and somehow even a patchwork hunk of junk becomes a death machine. With this unwavering belief in mind, Grokka began cobbling together his ultramarine disguise. He hammered some scrap metal into rough shapes that looked like armour plates, painted the whole thing blue, because blue is lucky, and jammed a bucket on his head. The result was an unholy fusion of junk, held together by duct tape and wishful thinking. But to Grokka, it looked just like those shiny ultramarine lads. And since he believed it, the universe, in its strange way, bent reality to sort of make it true. Gregarious, as Grokka now called himself, marched right into the ultramarine camp, bellowing, "For the Emperor!" his voice coming out as a deep, guttural roar. And while it didn't quite match the ultramarines' disciplined tones, it was close enough that the humans didn't even blink. Grokka's armour rattled like a bag of spanners, but the ultramarines, blinded by Grokka's belief in his disguise, saw only a fully armoured space marine. One of the ultramarines, a sergeant with an awful lot of skulls decorating his armour, frowned beneath his helmet.
"You seem different, Brother Gregarious."
"Yeah," Grokka barked, thumping his chest, which made his whole armour wobble dangerously. "Been hitting the weight, so extra muscly." The ultramarines nodded slowly, buying into the absurdity because Grokka believed so hard. After all, this was the great power of the orcs. When they believed something was true, it often was. And here's where orc belief met the strange reality-bending force of the universe. Grokka's armour, which should have been nothing more than scrap metal, was now deflecting shots like proper ceramite. His chopper, an orc weapon if ever there was one, was somehow passing as a bolter. Everything was working because Grokka knew it would, and that was enough to fool the humans. The Ultramarines, clearly puzzled but willing to accept Grokka's presence, invited him along to their next battle. Grokka, now fully committed in his role as Gregarious, charged into battle alongside them, roaring and waving his chopper like a madman. The Ultramarines fired in disciplined volleys. Grokka hacked and slashed anything in his path. And it worked. The enemies fell, and Grokka's hodgepodge armour seemed to protect him just as well as any Ultramarine gear. But then he arrived. A chaplain, draped in black robes with more skulls than was strictly necessary, approached Grokka. He tilted his head, suspicion creeping into his gaze.
"Brother Gregarious,"
the chaplain growled.
"your methods seem unorthodox."
"Yeah," Grokka barked, still believing his disguise with all his heart. "Gotta be thinking outside the box, right? All for the Emperor." The chaplain's eyes narrowed beneath his skull.
"Indeed,"
he muttered, stepping closer. Before Grokka could react, the chaplain reached out and yanked Grokka's helmet clean off, revealing Grokka's green, tusked face. Silence fell over the battlefield. The Ultramarines, snapping out of their orky belief-induced trance, stared at the large, very much not human face of their brother Gregarious. Surprise, Grokka said. The chaplain's eyes narrowed further.
"Xenos,"
he exclaimed, a term reserved for alien species. "Well, that's me cue," Grokka muttered to himself. And with a roar, he punched the chaplain, turned and bolted, his scrap metal armour clanking behind him. As bolter rounds whizzed past him, Grokka couldn't help but grin. Sure, the plan hadn't worked perfectly, but it had worked long enough to keep him alive. Maybe next time he wouldn't pretend to be a Hume. But then again, blue is lucky, and Grokka still had plenty of blue paint left. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed making it and the images. Don't forget to like and share to, I don't know, your favourite Facebook groups or Instagram or wherever you want to. And if it's popular, I'll make some more.